We're learning Sicha Aleph of Parshas Bechukosai in Chelek Yud Zayin on page 313. In Ascholas Parshaseinu is Rashi meitig from Posik in Bechukosai Telechu und is mefarish Yochoil Zekim mitzvahs. I would think Bechukosai Telechu refers to fulfilling mitzvahs. Keshu Omer ves mitzvosai tishmeru. When the Posik says right after this, and you will keep mitzvahs, Harekim mitzvahs omer. So there it says about the mitzvahs. Hamani mekayim in Bechukosai telechu. So why does the pasuk say in Bechukosai telechu? What is this talking about? Shetiu amelim batayra, that you should toil in learning Torah. The makir von dem Pirish Rashi is Teres Kainim. The source of Rashi is here in the Teres Kainim. Aber wie bald as Rashi bepirushay, was es al derech hapshat pshutisha mikra bringt von droshes Razal, nor dort was es do a hechrich deruf in pshutan shlaksuvim ki meduba kama pamim. Since Rashi only quotes anything from a Medrash or from Chazal, only if it's relevant to explain the simple pshat of the pasuk itself, Musman sagen, as Oster Pirish von Teres Kain, was Rashi bringt da, is Muchrech and Pashto Savanas HaKosef. That this explanation on Bechukosai Telecha that Rashi quotes here is the basic understanding of the pshat of the pasuk, and that's why Rashi is quoting it. Der Mitte sich move on, so this also explains for was Rashi darf da bringen die ganze Ariches Yochel Zeh Kiyama Mitzvahs Keshehu Eimer Chulu. Why Rashi begins with what I would interpret Bechukosai Telechu to mean, and then he explains why you can't, and then he tells you what the pshat is. Why doesn't Rashi immediately go to the pshat? Und sich nicht mistapik mit den Etzem HaPirish, as in Bechukosai Telechu meint, Amelim Batayra. It doesn't simply say the translation that Bechukosai Telechu means to learn Torah, or to harav, to toil in learning Torah. Warum? Demolt, wollt gewen an ist in es Mokum zu annehmen, as das is the Pashete Taich from Bechukosai Telechu. Then you would think that that is the simple translation of Bechukosai Telechu. That these words, Bechukosai Telechu, means to toil in Torah. Und das ist nicht ausgehalten. That's incorrect. Weil der Teich von Bechukosai, bederach klal, is mitzvahs. Bechukosai usually refers to mitzvahs. Der Rebbe muss Rashi makdim sein, so therefore Rashi explains. Yochel, meaning the erste svara is, so Yochel meaning that, what is the simple translation of Bechukosai Telechu, as das meint Kiyama mitzvahs. Nach Hayais, as Kiyama mitzvahs steht schon weiter im Pasuk, since Kiyama Mitzvah says right after this in the pasuk, is from dem Mochach, as the friedige Werte im Bechukosai Telechu meint nicht Kiyama Mitzvahs, nor Amelim Batayra. That proves to us that it's not referring to doing mitzvahs, but rather haraving and learning Torah. So Zabanit move on. However, if that's what Rashi is coming to clarify, so the questions here are as follows. Aleph number 1, Rashi Bavorent, what Rashi is clarifying is, as da is Bechukosai nit mitzvahs nor Torah. The translation, the meaning of Bechukosai, is not like it usually is mitzvahs, rather Torah. That's the only clarification of Rashi. Hat gedacht meitig sein vom Pasuk in Bechukosai. So Rashi should quote from the Pasuk just Bechukosai in Bechukosai, und mefarish sein, and just to say Yochel Elu mitzvahs. I would think Bechukosai refers to mitzvahs. Kashoimer ves mitzvosai, when it says afterwards mitzvosai, hare mitzvahs amuren. So it says mitzvahs. Nit mer. It's not necessary for Rashi to bring from the pasuk the word telechu, and it's not necessary from Rashi to bring later from the pasuk tishmeru, and then to say kiyuma mitzvahs, and so on, and Bechukosai telechu. He's just clarifying the meaning of Bechukosai, that it doesn't refer to mitzvahs, it refers to Torah. So why does Rashi add more than what he has to? The question is even stronger when you look at the source in Teres Kainim. Moke Pirish Rashi, Shteitake. There, that's the way it says it. Yochel Elu mitzvahs. I would think that Bechukosai is the mitzvahs. And Rashi is Mishane dem Loshen und schreibt Kiyama mitzvahs. Rashi changes the language that it says in the Teres Kainim, the source of where he took it from, and he adds, I would think this is the fulfillment of the mitzvahs. So now when it says Bechukosai Telechu, it refers to Amelim Batayra. So why is Rashi changing from the source and adding more than necessary? Gimel, other question here is, Musman sagen, it's not based on what we said before, we would have to conclude, as Rashi Bavorent hat zweite Sach in Kiyuma Mitzvahs, Amelim Batayra. That Rashi is coming to say that it's not just fulfillment, simple fulfillment of mitzvahs, but it's Amelim. It's toiling and working hard and learning Torah. So we're not only switching from the meaning of mitzvahs to Torah, but we're also switching from kiyum to amelim b'Torah. Darf man verstehen? So the question is, from was mitzvahs tishmeru hat nun bloß die Reihe as Bechukosai meint nicht mitzvahs? Because it says later mitzvahs, so we know that Bechukosai is not mitzvahs, nor Torah. From wann is the hechrech as es meint amelim b'Torah? But from where does Rashi know that it doesn't mean just simply learning Torah, but it means amelim b'Torah, which is a unique way of learning Torah. When someone focuses and exerts himself and toils in the learning of Torah, where did Rashi take this from? So that's the three questions over here on the arichas of Rashi's lashon and the extra words that seem to be not necessary in Rashi's lashon. Besides this, Dalet, there's another question here. Oif ves mitzvosai tishmeru. If you look at what Rashi says right after this, on those words, ves mitzvosai tishmeru, is Rashi mefarish. So there Rashi says, Hevu amelim b'Torah al menas lishmer lekayim. You should learn Torah, you should harve in learning Torah with the purpose to keep and fulfill what you learn. So that's what Rashi seemingly is saying, that mitzvosai tishmeru does not mean to fulfill mitzvahs. It means to learn with the intention to fulfill the mitzvahs. L'chayre is doch instead zu dem, was Rashi sagt frier. This is a contradiction to what Rashi just said before this, that keshu oime, ves mitzvosai tishmeru harekiyim ha-mitzvahs amar. That mitzvahs tishmeru is referring to the actual fulfillment of mitzvahs. As ves mitzvahs tishmeru meint kiyam mitzvahs. Und nit a prat in eifen limidat Torah soll sein al menas. Ves mitzvahs tishmeru is not coming to clarify how you should learn. That you should learn with the purpose to fulfill, but it actually means fulfilling mitzvahs. So how does Rashi say afterwards that all it means is the purpose of your learning, for the intention to fulfill mitzvahs? The beer in them, so the explanation of what really the question of Rashi is, and why Rashi can't simply say that we're going to switch from mitzvahs, that the meaning of Bechukosai, we're going to switch it from mitzvahs to Torah. There's more here. Talmud Torah is eine von die Taryag mitzvahs. Learning Torah is one of the 630 mitzvahs. Und wie der Bechamish Mikre weiß das euch von dem, so even a child learning knows this fact, from the fact that if limidat Torah macht jede früh morgen die Brache, asher kitshano b'mitzvaysav. The birchas HaTorah in the morning is b'mitzvaysav, that it's a mitzvah. Und if it's verstandig, if so it's understood, for was me kennet mefarish sein, as Bechukosai telechu meint limidat Torah. So Bechukosai telechu cannot simply be referring to learning Torah. After we say that mitzvaysav tishmeru includes all mitzvahs, so Bechukosai telechu cannot just mean learning Torah. Varam limidat Torah is in klal von mitzvahs. Learning Torah is part of the 630 mitzvahs. So bleibt doch wieder die Scheile. So therefore the question remains, harekim ha-mitzvahs amor, if the Torah says to fulfill all mitzvahs, which includes learning Torah, so what is the Torah adding by saying Bechukosai telechu? Davon is Rashi machriach. So this is what forces Rashi to explain and say, as Bechukosai telechu muss meinen nit limidat Torah stam. It doesn't refer to simply learning Torah, nor a prat neisef in limidat Torah. There's an additional thing here that the Torah is telling me about how you're going to be learning the Torah. Was me kennen mit wissen von mitzvahs tishmeru, which you cannot know and is not part of the mitzvahs, the 630 mitzvahs. Weil euch on dem prat is me mekayim the mitzvah von Talmud Torah. Because even without this added detail that Rashi tells us, you'll fulfill all mitzvahs, including learning Torah, but there's something more in your learning. Und das direkt aus dem Wort Telechu nitztam tishmeru mekayim sein lernen Torah. And this added inyan in learning Torah, which the Rebbe will explain that this is what Rashi is saying here. Amelim is in the word of Telechu, and you will go, you will walk, or you will follow, and not simply tishmeru, which means to keep or to observe the mitzvahs. So what is this added thing in learning Torah? In was faranayfen kemme meisav sein limidat Torah. So what is this added feature, this different new way of learning Torah that the Torah is telling us in these words, Bechukosai telechu, was euch an der Isafe fällt nicht in dem Tishmeru in kiyum mitzvahs Talmud Torah. That even without this, you're learning and you're fulfilling the mitzvah, but there's something more in the learning. So what is this about? If we're talking about adding in the quantity of your time, in zugeben Zman and limidat Torah, to add time to your learning, is das als derselbe Eufen Akiyum. That's still part of the same mitzvah of learning Torah. Derselbe Tishmeru. It's part of the Tishmeru, keeping all mitzvahs, including learning. Bedugmas kiyum mitzvahs v'hoyelach aliyos al yodcha. The mitzvah of putting on tefillin on your hands. See, this is a kurzes man or a lenges man. Whether you wear the tefillin for a short period of time or a longer time, is das als derselbe v'hoyelacha. It's all the fulfillment of the same mitzvah of having the tefillin on your arm, and it's included in the mitzvah of v'hoyelacha. So what's over here when it comes to Torah? To add more time in learning Torah. It's the same mitzvah included in the mitzvah of learning Torah. Musman der Rebbe sagen, so therefore you must say, as was unterstreicht in Bechukosai Teilechu. The Torah uses the term that you should learn Torah, and it says Teilechu. What does this mean? Nitzdam tishmenu. Not just to observe, to keep the mitzvahs. I suffer in eichus from dem kiyum limud Torah. The Torah is referring to adding in the quality of your learning. A different level of learning. Amelim batayra. When a person is exerting himself and making an effort in his learning. Was das wird nicht nichlal in mitzvah tishmeru. And that's not included in the basic fulfillment of the mitzvah, to observe the mitzvah. Wie bald das tishmeru is me mekayim euch durch lernen nicht in an Eifen von Amal. Because you fulfill the mitzvah just by simply learning Torah. And therefore Rashi over here is not simply coming to exchange and say that Bechukosai means Torah as opposed to mitzvahs. But Rashi comes and says there's kiyum mitzvahs, there's the basic requirement, the obligation to fulfill the mitzvah, and then there's to add more in the quality of the mitzvah, which regarding Talmud Torah, that would be someone that toils in learning. That's the added inyan of Teilechu that the Torah is saying versus Tishmeru. So that explains why Rashi adds those words and doesn't simply talk about mitzvahs versus Torah. Now that Rashi tells us that Bechukosai Teilecha refers to a Melim Batayra, so the order in the pasuk seems to be the reverse. Bald as mitzvah tishmeru is kailol, the kiyum from mitzvah Talmud Torah and an eifung from stam limod. So when it says in the pasuk afterwards, mitzvah tishmeru, so that includes learning Torah. Lemigras, when someone learns the basic learning of the information and understanding what he's learning on a basic level. Hat es doch gedarft stehen im Pasuk frier far Bechukosai Teilechu. If that's what kind of learning is included in mitzvah tishmeru, so that comes before Bechukosai Teilechu, which refers to someone that's learning on a deeper level. Azay is doch to say that a limud bepashtus. That's simply the order of learning. Frier dav zayin the limud lemigras. First you learn Torah to get the basic information of what you're learning. Und erst danach can sein der Amal batayra, and then you learn deeper to heart of it to see limud beiyun. Man kann doch nicht anheben mit vertiefen sich bald beiyun. You can't immediately go and analyze and learn deeply. Edem lernet nicht frien and an eifel lemigras before you learn and see the basic information that's here. Hein verwas steht frier Bechukosai Teilechu und danach was mitzvah tishmeru. So why is the Torah first saying the second step? Bechukosai Teilechu, to learn deeper, and then comes back to mitzvah tishmeru, which refers to mitzvahs, including learning Torah on a basic level. Now, the Rebbe clarifies this question even further. Volt mengelerend, if we were to say, as the Taich from Bechukosai Teilechu is limudat Torah stam, that Bechukosai Teilechu refers to learning on a basic level, including all levels of learning Torah, and including on a basic level. On mitzvah tishmeru is maisa mitzvahs, and then when it speaks about the mitzvahs, it's only talking about the actions of fulfilling the mitzvahs. Volt gewen move on, then it would be perfectly understood for was das steht frier far ves mitzvah tishmeru. Why learning comes before keeping the mitzvahs? Weil nor Talmud maybe lidei maisa. Only after you learn and you know the halachas does it bring you to be able to fulfill the mitzvahs. Ukamuvam bepashtus, as kedei zu wissen, was zu tun und wie zu tun, darf man früher lernen. In order to know what to do and how to do the mitzvahs, so you have to learn to get the information of the mitzvahs. Aber b'shas melernt as Bechukosai Teilechu meant amal Torah. But if we're saying that Bechukosai Teilechu does not refer to basic learning, it refers to learning deeply. Kann man schon lechayre nicht maßbe sein, as the far steht frie Bechukosai Teilechu, weil das ist a Tnai muktem, was bringt zu wissen mitzvah tishmeru maisa mitzvahs. So now we can't say that learning deeply is a condition to bring you to be able to fulfill the mitzvahs. Weil leidas a maisa sheyason, in order to know the actions of what you have to do, is nit neitig der oifen a limud dafke von amal Torah. It's not necessary to learn with a deep and analyzing, learning, when the person's heart isn't Torah, that's not necessary for Leidas HaMaisa Sheyasen. If to wissen dem Din Halacha L'Maisa is maspik, limud L'Migras, and the Sifrei Halacha v'chulu. You have to learn the basic information in the Sifrei Halacha that tell you what to do. So why does Omel Torah come before? The Fun Gufe is Rashi Machriach. So this is what forces Rashi to say, as das is a prat in a Meilim B'Torah, that when the Torah says afterwards, Ves mitzvah say tishmeru, this is following up, and it's a detail in the beginning of the pasuk where it says Ves b'chukosai telechu. As nid blois der limud lemigras dav zayin mit der kavana lishmer lekayim. And what the Torah here is telling you is not only when you learn Torah and you're learning to get the information, to know what to do. So there it's obvious that what you're learning is for the purpose of action, to know how to fulfill the mitzvahs. But the Torah here is telling me not only that, not oich that I'm meilim b'Torah, even when you get immersed in learning on a deeper level, dav zayin al manas lishmer lekayim. It should all be for the purpose to take from it, to observe and to put it into practice. That's the continuation of the pasuk. That the Torah is telling me this chiddush that even the Amelim b'Torah should lead to Ves mitzvah say tishmeru. So that's why it's in this order. Und auf dem bringt Rashi kemoishe nemar olemaretem oisam ushmartem laseisam, that you learn Torah and you observe, you fulfill the mitzvahs as limidat Torah belichiluk. When the pasuk says olemaretem oisam, it includes all levels of learning. There's no distinction made here in the pasuk. So that includes even someone that's learning on a much deeper level. It has to always be having in mind to put it into action to be able to observe the mitzvahs. So yes, Ves mitzvah sai tishmeru, if you want to translate those words for itself, of course it does refer to actually fulfilling mitzvahs. As Rashi said in the beginning, Ves mitzvah sai tishmeru means mitzvahs. However, the explanation of the order of the pasuk, why that comes after Bechukosai telechu, which means Amelim b'Torah, is because the pasuk wants you to understand that not only learning legirsa, where you're learning the information, is the point to bring you to fulfill mitzvahs, but even when you're learning on a deeper level, it should also be for the purpose of fulfilling the mitzvahs. So Lefizeh move on. Based on this we understand, as das was Rashi sagt, hevu amelim b'Torah chulu, that you should learn Torah b'nigeya zu mitzvah sai tishmeru. And Rashi says this not only in the beginning, but also regarding mitzvah sai tishmeru, that the purpose of your learning should be amelim b'Torah, to fulfill mitzvahs. B'nigeya zu mitzvah sai tishmeru is kein stirne zu dem, was sagt frier as mitzvah sai tishmeru meint kiyama mitzvahs. It's not at all a contradiction to what Rashi said in the beginning, that mitzvah sai tishmeru is referring to mitzvahs. So why not? But Rashi's pirish da, when Rashi here explains that your learning should be with the intention to fulfill mitzvahs, is nit auf die Werte, was mitzvah sai tishmeru. Rashi here is not focusing on explaining the meaning of these words, Ves mitzvah say tishmeru. Their meaning is simply understood. Like Rashi said in the beginning, it means fulfilling mitzvahs. Nor oifim b'chukosai telechu. This is a continuation of Rashi's pirish of b'chukosai telechu. And as the Rebbe says in the Ha'ara, that it's likely to say that it was really all one dibur maschel, and the printer went and divided it into two dibur maschels, and it seems like that the second half of Rashi is coming to explain the words Ves mitzvah say tishmeru, but that's not the case. He's coming to explain the continuation and the flow of the pasuk, why mitzvah say tishmeru comes after b'chukosai telechu. So therefore, frier verteidigt Rashi die Wörter allein. First, Rashi explains what's the correct meaning of b'chukosai telechu. As a meinen shetiu amelim b'Torah, that it means that a yid should harven Torah. Und danach, der Tanfa was stehen far Ves mitzvah say tishmeru. Then he explains, if so, why does this come before Ves mitzvah say tishmeru, which is the basic fulfillment of mitzvahs? Weil der amelim b'Torah darf sein al manas lishmer lekayim. The Torah wants you to know that even when you learn on a deeper level Torah, it should also be with the intention to take from it to fulfill and observe the mitzvahs. So Rashi is only coming to explain the order of the pasuk. But the actual taich of mitzvah say tishmeru, yeah, like Rashi said in the beginning, that means to fulfill the mitzvahs. So this explains the answers the questions that the Rebbe asked in the beginning of the Sikha regarding these Rashis here. Man darf noch aber verstehen, but there's still another question here. Von Lashon Rashi, Yochel zeh kiyama mitzvahs. When Rashi says, I would think to say that b'chukosai telechu refers to fulfilling mitzvahs, is mochach, it's clear, as bepashtus, what man gedarft lernen, as b'chukosai telechu meint kiyama mitzvahs. Simply, I would say that b'chukosai telechu refers to fulfilling mitzvahs. Nor mitzad dem Hechrach von Arei Kiyam HaMitzvahs Amor in die Weite der Gewerte, was mit zwei sei Tishmeru, it's only because of what it says afterwards. Was mit zwei sei Tishmeru, so that includes all mitzvahs, muss man lernen as the Pirish von Bechukosai Telechu is a Meilim Bat Torah, that it refers to learning Torah on a deeper level. That's what we see clearly from Rashi. But otherwise, I would say Bechukosai Telechu refers to mitzvahs. Isn't it move on? So the question here is, es is doch Yedua as in mitzvahs and in da kamas sugim. It's known that mitzvahs is made up of a few categories. Eidus, Chukim, and Mishpatim. Und der Sug Chukim, what is the meaning of Chukim? What's that category of mitzvahs? Is the mitzvahs welche seinen Geseiras HaMelech. They are mitzvahs that are simply a decree of the Eibishter without any reason. Wie Rashi hat schon früher mefarish gewinnt in Parshas Achrei, this is explained before in Rashi, that that's what Chukim means. Und wie bald azoi stellt sich die Scheile, if so, the question here is, man kann doch da lernen bepashtus. Why can't we simply say over here to answer the repetition of the pasuk, Bechukosai meint, die mitzvahs and suk von Chukim. Bechukosai refers to those mitzvahs in the category of Chukim that have no reason, was sind ein Hecher von Seichel, above reason. It's translated this way in other places. They refer to that category of mitzvahs that are mishpatim, mitzvahs that are logical and rational. So why can't we just divide it this way? And there's no need to say that Bechukosai Telechu means Torah, which is not really the simple pshat of the word Bechukosai. To say that Bechukosai literally means the chukim is more of the simple pshat. The pashtus can man in, so now simply we could answer as follows. As oid mit dem Wort mitzvaisai, if when the Torah writes mitzvaisai tishmeru, is there pasuk oisen, not ein suk von mitzvahs, mishpatim, the Torah is really referring to only one category of mitzvahs, the mishpatim of mitzvahs, wollt nit benutzt dem lashem mitzvaisai, ashen kaidel for alle mitzvahs. So why would the Torah use the term mitzvaisai, which is a name, which is a title that includes all mitzvahs? Nor dem lashem mishpatai. The Torah should say mishpatai, which refers to that particular category of mitzvahs. As even gefunden pasuk, as you find this in the pasuk that's also in this week's parsha, Eila hachukim v'mishpatim v'hateiris. So the Torah divides it as chukim, there are mishpatim, and then it says teiris. As b'shas, will mefared sein, basundere sugim von mitzvahs. When the Torah wants to elaborate on the different categories of mitzvahs, ruft an dem sug mitzvahs später mit dem Shem prati mishpatim. So the Torah refers to it specifically as mishpatim, und nicht mit dem Namen mitzvahs, stam. And it doesn't refer to the mishpatim as mitzvahs, which is all-inclusive. So if here the Torah says mitzvaisai tishmeru, is a raya as a meint alle mitzvahs. So that means that mitzvaisai tishmeru includes all category of mitzvahs, even chukim. And therefore when it says before, bechukosai telechu, we can't anymore say that the Torah is singling out the chukim. That's what we could simply say why Rashi doesn't accept this pshat. However, seemingly this is not enough of an explanation. What we find in a friedigen art, wo der pasuk teilt voneinander die mitzvahs l'sugeyen. There's an earlier pasuk in Torah where the Torah divides mitzvahs into different categories, and there it says as follows: Eikev ashashama Avram b'kaili. Avram listened to my voice. Vayishmer mishmarti mitzvoisai chukoisai v'seiroisai. So here again, the Torah does a similar thing, and it divides the mitzvahs into mitzvoisai, chukoisai, and teiroisai. Mitzvahs and chukim are mentioned here. Und Rashi is dort mefarish. Rashi himself explains there, mitzvoisai, what does mitzvoisai mean? Dvarim, those matters, she'ilu loy nichtevu, ru'uyin hein litztavos. Even if they weren't written, it would be deserving, it would be befitting that it should be commanded. Was das meint? Mishpatim. That refers to those logical mitzvahs that are necessary for normal human behavior, and that's what mitzvaisai means. And then Chukoisai Rashi says, Dvarim sheyetzahara v'mesa'ila meshiven aleim. Those matters that the Yetzahara and the nations of the world come and argue with Yidden and say, what are you doing this for? So we see here clearly in Rashi what mitzvaisai means, that it's mishpatim, and chukaisai means the chukim, the ones that have no reason. And then Rashi says, v'teiroisai lahavi teira shebal peh, that is coming to add even teira shebal peh. As v'teiroisai loshen rabim, because it uses a plural term, meant teira shebiksav und teira shebal peh. Zet me doch von dem. So what do we see from Rashi there? As I feel when the pasuk sagt loshem mitzvah stam, when the pasuk uses the term mitzvahs with a general, all-inclusive, all mitzvahs. But however, since right after mitzvaisai it says chukaisai, Meint beide Lashonis, meint mit beide Lashonis zwei Suge mitzvahs. So we must say that these two different expressions of mitzvahs and chukim are different categories of mitzvahs. Hat man doch also gekannt, einlernen euch bin die dan. So why wouldn't Rashi say the same thing here? Bechukosai telechu is the chukim. Mitzvosai tishmeru are the mishpatim. Just like Rashi explains this in Parshas Toldos regarding Avraham Avinu. Is there beer in them? So the answer to this question is that there's a difference between before Matan Torah and after Matan Torah, as the Rabbi will explain here. The word mitzvahs is meloshen tzivui. What's the simple meaning of the word mitzvahs? Why this is the all-inclusive title for all mitzvahs? It means it's a command. Sie sind tzivuyim from the Eibishter. The Eibishter commands these mitzvahs. So let's move on. If so, it's understood as der nomen da is massen belois benigay the mitzvahs from nach Matan Torah. So this name of mitzvahs is only appropriately used after Matan Torah when the Eibishter actually commanded the mitzvahs. Was damals hat der Eibishter angesagt alle mitzvahs. Aber vor dem Zivi von Eibishter bei Matan Torah, but before the Eibishter commanded the mitzvahs, ist doch beim Sug mitzvahs, oi welche man sagt, ashe shama Avram goimer, when we say that Avram listened to mitzvahs and we're referring to them as mitzvahs, which means that the Eibishter commands them, nit gewende mitzias von dem Zivui. There still wasn't yet any tzivui, any command that was given yet, so therefore this can't be referring to all category of mitzvahs. How can we use the term mitzvosai before Matan Torah if there was no command yet? Kommt doch aus, as der Loshe mitzvosai, was steht bei Avraham Avinu far Matan Torah? If so, when it says mitzvosai by Avraham Avinu before Matan Torah, can it mean a Meloshen Tzivui HaKadosh Baruch Hu? The word mitzvosai does not refer to tzivui, to the commands of the Eibishter, including all mitzvahs. Wie bald kanas is noch gewend far dem Zman HaTzivui. It's before the time of the command. So in other words, the real question Rashi has there in Toldos by Avram when he explains mitzvosai versus chukosai is not the fact that there's a repetition here between mitzvosai and chukosai. There's another question here. What bechlal does mitzvosai, meaning command, mean before Matan Torah? The Rebbe muss man dort lernen, so that's the reason why there Rashi must say, as mitzvosai meint, die inyanim welche seinen ruuyin leitztavois damolt shoyin al piseichel. That mitzvosai does not mean those mitzvahs that were actually commanded, but it refers to such kind of mitzvahs that even before they're commanded, it's befitting that they be commanded even then already. According to Seichel, logic dictates that it's the right kind of behavior. Und sie werden angerufen mit Namen mitzvahs. Therefore, even then, they're referred to as mitzvahs, as commands. The far was Seichel is shein mitzavav, because logic dictates that it's the right thing to do. That's the reason for the term mitzvosai before Matan Torah. Which is not the case when the term mitzvosai is used over here in the pasuk in our parsha. So it's here, it's after Matan Torah. Wie bald as the loshem mitzvahs legt sich auf alle mitzvahs. So the term mitzvahs does refer to all mitzvahs. Weil sie sind alle tzivuyim from the Eibishter. Hashem commands all of the mitzvahs. Is the Rebbe schwer zu einteichen? So here, Rashi says, is telling us that it's difficult to say, as the mit is a shayla b'chukosai, that the term mitzvosai negates and does not include b'chukosai, was steht in selben pasuk, welche sind euch tzivui Hashem, which is written earlier in the pasuk, but are also tzivuyim from the Eibishter. So mitzvosai, in the translation of commands, should definitely include even the chukim as well. Wird gemeint, bloß the sug from mishpatim. It's very difficult to say that mitzvosai would only include that category of mishpatim. Now, man darf lernen, as mitzvosai tishmeru geht auf alle mitzvahs. Mitzvosai tishmeru includes all mitzvahs, heidos, chukim, and mishpatim, and even also learning Torah. Und bei derech memele darf man annehmen, as bechukosai telechu meint, amelim b'Torah. And that's how we come to the conclusion that bechukosai telechu is a unique level of learning Torah when a person is harving and is learning on a deeper level of learning Torah. So this concludes the explanation of this Rashi and the simple pshat of Rashi. The explanation of what Rashi is saying here on a deeper level according to what it says in Chassidus. Hagam as Rashi's hechrich. So even though when we look simply and we see that what's Rashi's proof as in Bechukosai telechu meant a meilim b'Torah, that we translate Bechukosai telechu to mean to learn and toil in Torah, is nit von Loshen Bechukosai gufa. It doesn't come from the meaning of the word Bechukosai itself, not from weiter. It's because of what it says afterwards. As Rashi says, Kishu oime ves mitzvah tishmur harei kiyem mitzvahs amor. So that's the proof from Rashi, from the continuation of the pasuk. Von deswegen darf man sagen, however, we must say, as der inyan von a meilim b'Torah is merumes euch in dem Loshen Bechukosai telechu. This level of learning is hinted also in the actual words and the language of Bechukosai telechu. And the Rabbi explains why we should say so. We know Torah is called light. Alle in Jahren von Torah sind in einer lichtigen Öfen und sie beleuchten jede Sache. Everything in Torah is illuminated, it's light and it illuminates everything. Und das meint Kamuvan, and this includes obviously as Torah. Valachas kama v'kama Torah shebiksav, everything in Torah. And for sure, Torah shebiksav is geschrieben geworden in Anöfen as the Teichen HaKosov soll sein lichtig. That every word in the pasuk, there's a specific reason of why it's written this way. And if you look at the words, it illuminates the matter. Oib de word Bechukosai wird klar nicht gewissen auf Torah. If the word Bechukosai would have no indication, it doesn't show anything about Torah, nor if mitzvahs, it just is a category of mitzvahs, wollt dann anstatt dem Loshen Bechukosai gestanden b'seirasi oder b'seiraisai, was direkt ist klar dem Mechuven Torah. So the Torah would have said, b'seiraisai telechu, b'seirasi telechu. The Torah wouldn't write the term Bechukosai. Bald aber as Torah hat ausgeklebt dem Loshen Bechukosai is muchrach as dafke in dem Loshen is mudgish der inyan von a meilim b'Torah. That in this word Bechukosai we could see how Torah is hinted in this word itself. It's illuminated and it's seen in this word itself. To verstehen, to understand this, wie soll der Loshen Bechukosai, wenn es wird benutzt auf Limud Torah, direkt aus der Minyan von Amal Torah. So how does this word express learning Torah, and not just simply learning Torah, but learning Torah on a deeper level? Darf man früher Masbe sein, a Prat in dem Teichen von dem Torah Chukim, was wird benutzt, bescheiches zu Mitzvahs. So we first have to explain a detail about what this term Chukim means regarding Mitzvahs. So it says Yedua, it's known. As Chutz, dem Namen Mitzvahs, was is Hashem Klolif for alle Mitzvahs, it's a general name for all mitzvahs, kanal, as we've spoken before, hat jedes Sug für Mitzvahs a besonder Namen. Each category of mitzvahs has its own specific name. Eidus, Mishpatim, and Chukim. Each one of these names means something. Eidus is the Sug von Mitzvahs, was sagen Eidus auf gewisse Inyanim. These are mitzvahs that serve as a testimony for certain things. Of Brias Shemayim v'Aretz, creation of heaven and earth, of Yitzias Mitzrayim, as a Shabbos, Tefillin. Shabbos is to commemorate the Eibishter creating the world in 6 days and resting on Shabbos. Tefillin is connected to Yitzias Mitzrayim. V'chadayim. Those are the mitzvahs of Eidim that serve as a testimony. Mishpatim, zenen keil die mitzvahs, was ilmali nit Teire, wat man sie allein verstanden durch Mishpat Sichli. A person can judge and think with his own mind and see how this is the right behavior for a person. That's what the meaning of the word mishpatim means. Chukim zenen die mitzvahs, welche zenen durchais gezeres hamelach. Chukim refers to the category of mitzvahs that are completely a command and a decree from the Eibishter, the king. Sie haben nicht kein Orten Seichel, they have no room in logic at all, nicht als Mishpatim, and euch nicht als Eidos, not as something which the human mind could on its own understand, and not even as a testimony that the Eibusher tells us to fulfill, not in Yonim is Gzeire, Gezarti, Chukke, Chakakti. It's a decree, it's a command that the Eibusher tells us to fulfill. That's the meaning of Bechukosai, of Chukim. In Lashon HaKodesh, so now, in the language of Lashon HaKodesh, was is nit kein Lashon Haskemi. It's not simply a language that human beings got together and put together words in order to have a mode of communication. Everything in the language, every word is precise. As yibalti mitzvahs, welche haben nit kein Art und Seichel, heißen mit dem Namen Chukim. So since mitzvahs that do not have any room in logic are called with the name Chukim, was Lashon Chukim hat euch der Abteich von Chakike. And in Lashon Kodesh, the word Chukim or Chukah is also related to another meaning, which is engraving. Wie is mevair on Lekutei Torah in dem Wort Bechukosai, as it's explained in Lekutei Torah here on this word Bechukosai. Darf man sagen, als es da teuchende Gescheiches zwischen dem Inyan von Chukah, L'mayla Ma'aseichel und Inyan HaChakike. So there has to be a connection in the content of these two things. The mitzvahs, this category of mitzvahs that are commands above seichel, and when you have something that's engraved, an engraving. So what's the connection between these two meanings of this one word in Lashon HaKodesh? The explanation is, der Klal is the Unterschied zwischen Meleches HaChakike und Ksive is. In them, so what is the basic difference between the action of when a person has to write something and when a person is engraving? So the difference is, was bei Chakike fordert sich mehr Koyach und Anstrengung wie bei Ksive. To engrave letters or words, there's a much bigger effort. You have to exert much more energy than when you write something. Dibur is blois maisa zutta. Dibur, the Gemara tells us, is considered to be a minor action. Ksive is shena maisa shalim. When you write something, that's a full action. Aber doch darf man bei Ksive nicht haben so viel Koyach und Anstrengung wie bei Chakike. But nevertheless, when you write, it doesn't demand so much effort as when you're engraving. Der Mittes move on, was die Mitzvahs, was in Blois Gzeres HaMelech, werden angerufen Chukim Lashon Chakike. So this explains why those mitzvahs that are just simply commands from the Eibishter is also related to the meaning of the word Chukim, which means engraving. Weil Dikim von Azach, was legt sich nicht in Seichel to fulfill something that your logic does not understand why, bis zu Heipach HaSeichel, and sometimes even doing those mitzvahs it seems to be against your logic, is Aveda Kasha. Is something that takes more, it's more difficult for a person to actually fulfill them. Asach schwerer, wie die Kiem von Azach, was ist al Piseichel. It's much more difficult and takes much more effort to be dedicated to fulfill these mitzvahs than the mitzvahs which a person appreciates and understands the point and what he's accomplishing through the mitzvah. So therefore, just like engraving takes much more effort, the chukim, the fulfilling of the chukim, is like a person that's doing something with more effort, like engraving. It takes much more effort to actually be dedicated to fulfill them. So based on this, we understand as the Lashon Bechukosai, when a word benutzt auf Teire. So now coming back that when Bechukosai is used in reference to learning Teire, meint nit limedat Teire stam. It doesn't refer to a person simply learning Teire. Nor amal Teire. It refers to a person that's working hard and learning on a deeper level. By chukka, meloshen chakika, chukka, which is related to the word chakika, to engrave, weist auf a schwerere Arbeit amal. It refers to someone working much harder, and in Teire it refers to a person harving and learning deeply in the subject of Teire that he's learning. On another point here is b'shas aleren Teire mit haravanya. When a person learns Teire on this level of amal, he toils in the Teire that he learns. Mit aveda kasha von chakika, learning like the difficult work that it takes to engrave. Poiltes a chakiki in hearts with the mleimedat Teire. The result, not only the actual experience and the exercise of this learning is difficult, but actually the result in the person is also related to the word chakika, that it becomes engraved in the heart of the person that learns. Unafille, ven libay keleva even, and even if your heart is like a heart of stone, is oibe harevit in Teire. When a person dedicates himself fully and immerses himself in the depths of Teire, wird sein versteinete Herz durchgekritzt und durchgerieben, durch dem Amal Teire, his heart will become engraved and it will be carved and rubbed out with the haravanya, with the learning of Teire. As the pasuk says, avonim shachaku mayim. Or it's from Oster Rab Nosson actually, that even a hard rock could be penetrated by the water that's dripping on it, like the famous story with Rabbi Akiva that saw the water dripping on the rock and made a hole even in a very stiff and stubborn rock. So this is the explanation of why Bechukosai refers to a Meilim Bat Teire, related to the Chakika of Teire. In Teire, in Teire, everything is precise and exact. Is vibalt as amal Teire heist meloshen chukka. So since learning Teire on this level of amal is called a chukka. The selbe loshen welch es wird benutzt auf mitzvahs shelemayla masechel. It's the same term used regarding the category of mitzvahs that are above logic. Is das gufa echache? So this itself is proof as der tam was amal Teire heist chukka, that the reason why when a person learns Teire on this level is called a chukka is nit blois mitzadem was is an aveda kasha. Canal, not only because of the exertion that a person has when he learns Teire on this level, related to Chakika, but euch mitzadem was der Amal Teire is verbunden mit Lamayla Ma'aseichel. When a person learns Teire on this level of Amal, there's a connection here to fulfilling those mitzvahs that are above Seichel. And the Rabbi explains, Afal Pi, even though it may seem the reverse, as the limud from Teire Shebal Peh muzayin in avona vasal gedavke. When you learn Torah Sheba'al Peh, you understand what you're learning. You must understand what you're learning, and that's what learning Torah Sheba'al Peh is. And if you learn and you don't understand the word that you're saying, you can't even make a bracha on your learning. It's not counted as learning. Afal pikein is that amal Torah verbunden mit l'mayla ma'aseichel. But nevertheless, the amal of Torah, when a person learns and toils in learning, that is related to the fulfillment of mitzvahs that's above seichel. V'yad Rabbi, on the contrary, dafke in Bechukosai, shalamayla ma'aseichel, specifically Bechukosai, which refers to mitzvahs above seichel, drikt zechais that amelim b'Torah. It's this word that uniquely expresses and accurately expresses amelim b'Torah, learning Torah on this deeper level. So what's the connection? Und das is in zwei inyanim. So the connection is in two aspects. Aleph, number one, that amal b'Torah dav zayin merer v'es leikt sich besichloi. A person has to toil in Torah, he has to exert himself in his learning more than his seichel allows. If a person's schedule of learning, if a person only connects to the subject that he's learning and analyzes it only to the extent of what his seichel tells him, heißt es nicht kein richtiger amal. So that's not truly amal. Amal means a person breaks himself a level further than he would expect from himself. So that's the real concept of amal, higher than seichel. So that's exactly what the mitzvahs of chukim are all about. That's one point. Beis, another point, that amal b'Torah bringt him to the anacha. When a person truly learns Torah on a deep level and really analyzes and gets deeper into the inside of what Torah is about, so that will really bring a person to the anacha v'asage. It'll bring him to the recognition and understanding as oich di inyanim v'lecha versteht ya b'sichloi. That even those things in Torah that he thinks that he could understand with his seichel, then in an emerson hecha von asage. The truth is that ultimately everything in Torah is above your grasp. It's all godliness that's invested in these words of Torah, and it's beyond your understanding. Kamaimer, as the famous statement that it says in Sifrei Kabbalah, Tachlis hayidiyah shaloi nedacha. The ultimate knowledge and understanding of Torah is to come to the realization that we understand nothing. This is true regarding the Eibishter himself. And the same is also true regarding the Torah, which is the Eibishter's wisdom. The Eibishter and his wisdom are really all one. As the Rambam says, that so therefore, if that's the case, then we could apply to this what the Alter Rebbe says in Shara Yichud Ve'emunah in Tanya, Kishem she'ein b'yecholes shum nivra lahasik b'iroi. Just like one cannot grasp the Creator Himself, kach einu yochel lahasik chachmasei. So too you can't grasp the Eibishter's chachma. Or K'may as the pasuk says, v'nelama me'einei kol choy. The Torah is hidden, concealed from the eyes of any living being. So when a person truly learns Torah and you toil the depths of the Torah, you will come to realize that you can't really understand the Torah. Is oibe meint as er hat tachlis hayidiyah in Torah. If a person thinks that he came to the full and ultimate understanding of Torah, is as a bavais, as by him felt that amal b'Torah, and he thinks that he gets it all and understands everything in his seichel, so then he's lacking in his haravanya of Torah. He hasn't gotten to that point where he came to the conclusion that really it's all the Eibishter, and the Eibishter you can't grasp. As the statement that the Friediger Rebbe said, even those parts in Torah that we seemingly could grasp and understand are really the same as all of the chukim of the Torah, which are all the Eibishter in them, which is one. The Torah and the Eibishter is all one, and we can't grasp it. So the true amal in Torah brings you to the lamayla min haseichel, which is what chukim are. Was al pizeh vet veren recht. So this explains why the pasuk uses the term Bechukosai telechu regarding learning Torah. We're talking about learning every subject in Torah, not only the category of mishpatim, chukim that is, nit blois the limud von chukim, not oich von edus and mishpatim. So if a person's learning Torah and all subjects in Torah, and the whole inyan of learning Torah is to understand what you're learning, so then why does the Torah use the term Bechukosai regarding learning Torah? So the answer is, since when a person really toils the depths of Torah and he comes to the true recognition of what Torah is, so a person will come to the recognition as Eich Mishpatim, that even those matters in Torah that he learns, that seemingly he could understand them, Zenin Chukim. They're really all part of the Eibishter's Torah that are Chukim, that are above his understanding.